Now, for our last segment of this plenary, we have a very special session about defining and understanding the importance of Zionism. He's the author of 9 books, including the seminal Zionist Ideas, Moynihan's Moment, and Never Alone. In conversation with Stand With Us senior educator Charlotte Korczak, I'm thrilled to welcome Professor Gil Troy.
Hi, Gil. It's great to be with you today. So let's just dive in and really have a conversation about Zionism broadly, but also Zionism today and how we are seeing it play out in today's world. So first of all, let's just really quickly, what's Zionism? Let's define it for our audience.
To understand Zionism, you have to understand Judaism. Judaism is not just a religion. It's like an Oreo cookie. Just like the Oreo cookie has the cookie part and the cream part, and that's what makes the Oreo cookie, Zionism is a mix of peoplehood and religion. Once we accept that the Jews are a people, we then understand that the Jews have a homeland. And they also have the right, like 192 other countries in the United Nations today, to establish a state on that homeland. Am Yisrael, Eretz Yisrael, Medinat Yisrael. The Jewish people, the land of Israel, and the state of Israel. And Zionism was initially the movement of national liberation to establish a state. Now it's to defend the state and to perfect the state. And there's one other dimension of Zionism today, which is so important for our Stand With Us family. It's also what I call identity Zionism. It's not just about how do we defend the state, how do we give to the state, how do we improve the state, but how does the state give us inspiration and meaning and a path forward? And that's the power of Zionism today.
Absolutely. I tend to always say to my students, they should have a very quick definition of Zionism that they could pull out of their pocket just to tell people. So my definition of modern Zionism is the belief in and support for Jewish self-determination in the historic ancestral homeland of the Jewish people. Does that work?
That works, but so many people don't get the peoplehood part.
Right.
Because we know, oh, Judaism and religion, right? But I said, wait a minute.
Absolutely.
Where's your kippah? Where's your kosher food? Where's your Shemirat Shabbat? And they said, well, no, but I'm just a Jew. I said, that's great, right? And that's the beauty of Judaism, that you don't have, there's no like religious test, right? There's a religious dimension and a peoplehood dimension.
Right, absolutely, super important, yeah. So what is unique about, let's jump into a different topic. What is unique about modern anti-Semitism, and where does Zionism or anti-Zionism, if you will, play a role in that kind of modern anti-Semitism?
My soul hurts. This is such a painful topic. The Zionists hoped that by establishing a Jewish state, we would eliminate anti-Semitism.
Right.
Humanists hope that after Auschwitz, after Hitler, there would be no anti-Semitism. I grew up in this world thinking, okay, the world learned its lesson. And today what we're seeing is a return of traditional Jew hatred. The hatred of the Jew who walks on the street, who dares to be different, and the hatred of the Jew who also fits in. But now there's a whole other dimension of anti-Semitism today, which is anti-Zionism. Whereas in the medieval ages, they hated the collective Jew. Now we hate the Jewish state. And too many of my colleagues, too many people in the media, the United Nations, too many of our Arab brothers and sisters, well, not all of them, focus on Israel as the center of evil, the obsession with Israel, the disproportionate focus on Israel, the demonization of Israel. These are marks of traditional anti-Semitism now transferred to the Jewish state.
So would you say that anti-Zionism is anti-Semitism, or is there some nuance there? Because I think this is somewhere where within the Zionist community, there's some disagreement.
Theoretically, we could sit around and say, oh, I don't believe in nationalism. But why do Jews have to be the first ones to say we're giving up on our nationalism when there are 192 countries in the United Nations that are built around nationalism?
Yeah.
We could say, oh, I don't really think that that Judaism should be so centered on peoplehood or on statehood. But the fact is that most anti-Zionists don't do that work today. Most anti-Zionists fall into the obsession, fall into the demonization, fall into the stereotypes that come straight out of the medieval playbook. And so the burden of proof isn't on us. Why are we Zionists sitting around saying, oh, can we somehow find a path for Jew haters to find something so that they can feel more comfortable? Feminists don't sit around and say, oh, how do we make it easier for sexists? Homosexuals don't sit around and say, how do we make it easier for homophobes? Blacks don't sit around saying, how do we make it easier for racists? Why do we Jews have to say, oh my goodness, they might be somehow nice? They're not.
Right.
If they really want to prove that they are critical of Israel, and there's obviously room for criticism of Israel, because in the democratic state of Israel, there's a lot of debate about what should Israel do and what should Israel not do. But today, Anti-Zionism isn't focused so much on what Israel does, but what Israel is. And it's the burden of proof is on them, not on us. Daniel Patrick Moynihan said, everybody asks what's wrong with the accused. I say what's wrong with the accuser.
Right. I think there's an element here also when we talk about Zionism today in a lack of understanding of Jewish history and an understanding that when people say I'm an anti-Zionist, you know, what a Zionist, what a Jew might hear is, well, why do you want to take away my protection in this world, right? Why do you want to relegate me back to this minority who's defenseless? And I think that's also where an element of anti-Zionism and anti-Semitism go hand in hand. It's, you know, anti-Zionist saying, no, I'm fine with Jews as long as they're, you know, again, defenseless and a minority in this world with no power. And I think that's another line that also needs to be drawn between anti-Zionism and anti-Semitism for people who just don't understand Jewish history.
It goes back to the French revolutionaries who say, to the Jews as individuals, everything. To the Jews collectively, nothing. And why are we always the one on the chopping block? Why are we the ones who were always targeted? And that's why the burden of proof is on them, not on us.
Absolutely.
And yeah, look, intellectually, there's always room for conversation. There's always room for criticism. But what we're seeing today is a tsunami of hatred. What we're seeing today is an intensity and intensification of this. And within the Jewish community, also we see this kind of false thing of, oh, let's go back and find somebody who wasn't Zionist in the 1800s or in the early 1900s. Well, you know, since the 1940s, people learned about the Shoah, the Holocaust. And since 1948, there's a state of Israel. If you reject the state of Israel, if you reject Zionism, you're rejecting, first of all, half of the Jewish people.
Right.
And you're also rejecting this movement that, as you point out, has been the most effective movement, not just for self-protection, but for Jewish pride. And that's why Natan Sharansky, the great Soviet Jewish refusenik, and I call those Jews within the Jewish community, Jewish leaders, Jewish professors, some rabbis, who are trying to undo this core consensus that I said at the beginning about peoplehood and statehood and homeland. We call them un-Jews. They're not non-Jews. They're not ex-Jews. They're not necessarily bad Jews, but they're undoing that core consensus that since 1948, especially since 1967, has had most Jews understand that a central part of modern Judaism is the link between the religion and the peoplehood and the state and the land, and this beautiful mix. And if it confuses people, that's on them. Every modern movement is a lovely symphony, a delightful mix of different ideas, different tensions, and let's juggle away rather than saying, oh, you have to be this or that. We have too much all or this or that in the modern world today.
Black and white. Yeah, not enough nuance, not enough gray. Absolutely. You recently wrote an article with Sharansky about the un-Jews, right? So if anyone wants to learn more, they can check out that article. There was also another article that you recently put out about how anti-Zionists are really affecting United States Jewry. I'd love if you could talk more about that and maybe even also expand it beyond just U.S. Jewry. How is it affecting diaspora Jewry as a whole?
It was actually when I came back from the Stand With Us conference in Los Angeles, which was such a wonderful bubble of love and intensity and inspiration. But even in that bubble, when I spoke to so many parents, they were worried about their kids. They were worried about the hatred that was surrounding us. When I spoke on college campuses to young Jews, when I spoke to birthright participants during the small window they were able to come here this summer, they all talked about, especially in May, feeling this intensity of hatred, this irrational singling out of Israel and the Jewish people. And of course, this big lie that somehow the fight between Israelis and Palestinians is exactly like the racial reckoning going on in the United States.
Right.
And I said, what's going on here? In Israel, no matter what goes on college campuses, we live very well. We have our issues, we have our challenges, but the attack both of the un-Jews within the Jewish community and the anti-Jews, the Bash Israel firsters in the outside Jewish community doesn't hurt us here in Israel. Who does it hurt? It hurts Jews.
Right.
It hurts Jews on campus. It hurts their parents. It hurts Jews who just want to celebrate. And what did I say? And it's true in the United States, it's true in Canada, it's true in Australia, it's true in Europe. They're robbing us of our dreams. They're robbing us of our joy. The greatest Jewish story of the 20th century, now the 21st century, is how the Jewish people, lost, broken, oppressed, miserable for so many years, found pride, found a home, found protection. And now, those haters and those self-haters are trying to rob us of our dreams. And all too often, we let them do it. We let them do it by making Israel not the source of inspiration, not the source of joy, but the source of all the problems and of all the tensions. I call it the Israel of the hunchback and the furrowed brow. Delight in Israel. Be proud of Israel. Celebrate Zionism. Embrace identity Zionism. And dream. Theodor Herzl said, if you will, it is no dream. Im tirtzu ein zo agada. And we have to go back to that and say, you're not going to steal our dreams. You're not going to take our love of Israel, of Zion, of the Jewish people, and of Judaism away from us.
Yeah, that's really important and really powerful. As an educator myself, I've experienced that a lot just in the last, 8 months since May. I think before we had a really big problem within the Jewish community of apathy, of young people just not, Israel, yeah, it's there, that's fine, but no real pride, no real passion, until they really came under attack, which is sad that that's what drives them sometimes. But I definitely have experienced that shift, and I couldn't agree more. There's this fear, but I think it's also pushing people, and young people especially, more towards pride in Israel and pride in being Jewish, because there is this acceptance of, well, they're going to hate me anyway, so I might as well be me. And then there is that sad group of maybe un-Jews, but also just Jews who feel like, well, if I let go of this one thing, Zionism, then I'll be accepted in these circles. And I think that is something we could talk about as well, of just something historical that Jews have always experienced. This notion of, if there's one thing that you let go of as a Jew, you won't face anti-Semitism anymore.
So first of all, I do think that the Jewish establishment is not giving our young people, our students, enough credit. I do feel that on the college campuses, and we're seeing this to Stand With Us and so many other places, we're seeing it in the United States, we're seeing it throughout the world, there are more and more young Jews who are saying, hey, wait a minute. Don't push me around. And wait a minute, I saw in May that this wasn't about what Israel does, but what Israel is. I saw how irrational it was. And I want to be woke. I want to be on the front lines in the fight for racial justice, but I can be a Zionist and a proud Jew and also do that. And yeah, unfortunately, it sits on a long history. Look, we, unfortunately, for all the pride that I have in our history and for all the wonders that we have in Jewish history, and we should never let, again, the haters just define us. There is also this long pedigree of Jew hatred, of anti-Semitism. And we've seen again and again that bargaining. I want to be the good Jew. If I only give up on this, if I only shave my beard, if I only take off my kippah, if I only stand straight, if I only look like them or act like them, then maybe they'll like me. Maybe I'll be nice enough for them.
Right.
And you know what? It doesn't work. When you sell your soul to the devil rejoices. And so the message has to be, I'm not a Jew, and I'm not a Zionist because of them. And I'm not a Jew, and I'm not a Zionist despite them. I'm a Jew, and I'm a Zionist because this is who I am, this is who I want to be, and this is the greatest gift my parents and grandparents and great-grandparents gave me. I feel so lucky that I fell into this. And I embrace those people who actually chose it. Right? And those of us who are Jewish today are all Jews by choice because it's so easy to fit in. It's so easy to assimilate. And so all of us together, those who converted and those who are born into this wonderful covenant, this wonderful story, have to stand up, stand with us, sing a song of Zion and sing a song of pride and stop apologizing and stop negotiating with them and start celebrating us.
Absolutely. As the daughter of two converts, that rings very true for me. I thank God every day that my parents chose this for me and I was born into it, and I feel very blessed. I went out and bought my Jewish star this summer very intentionally to show that pride and to wear it on my sleeve. And I hope more students are inspired to do that these days as well. What do you think is the secret of Zionism's success? I mean, here we are, this people who, we're from this land, this is our ancestral homeland, and we were sent into exile. We spent, 2,000, 2,500 years in exile around the world, suffering horrific persecution and oppression, and then managed to somehow create this amazing movement that allowed us to return home and reestablish our sovereignty. And correct me if I'm wrong as a historian, but I don't think anyone else, any other people has ever managed to do something like that. So what's the secret to Zionism's success in the 20th century?
Golda Meir liked to say, what's the secret to our success? Ein brera. We had no choice.
Right.
we were our backs were against the wall. Yeah. And that's half of it, right? But we have to be so careful not to make Zionism just anti-Semitism or today anti-Zionism. I think the secret to the Zionist success was the secret of Jewish success. That we're not, as I was saying, all or nothing. We're this mix. We're this mix of this nation and a religion. We're a mix of a global people, a diasporic people, and also people with a very strong sense of homeland. And we're a mix of what Natan Sharansky calls people searching for identity and searching for freedom. Today in the modern world, we have extremists who say, oh, I'm a liberal and I can't be a nationalist. We have nationalists who say, oh, I'm all about raising walls and not opening hearts. And if you go back to Sinai, go back to the Torah, and go back to the core of the Zionist movement, what's it about? It's about a mix. It's saying, no, I'm really proud of my people. I'm really proud of who I am. And by learning our story and learning our values and learning who we are, it doesn't make me put up more walls. It makes me open my heart. And it makes me proud of myself, but also able to do tikkun olam, true tikkun olam, fixing the universe, because we have an Israeli army that not only defends Israel and the Jewish people, but also goes to Surfside and helps save people who in the collapse. It goes to Haiti when there's an earthquake. And what are they doing? They're living out Jewish values, but they're showing that Jewish nationalism isn't only about me, but it's about me, and us. And that's liberal nationalism, that's Zionism, that's the secret of our success. That mix, that balance.
Amazing. So hopefully Stand With Us is part of that journey, right? Part of the journey of teaching that story and teaching that pride. And that's what we try to do every day. And you know, we love having you. We use you as much as we can to try to instill that pride in the next generation, because there's nothing like your words. And I'm really, really, truly honored that I was able to sit down with you and have this conversation. So thank you so much. Thank you for all your hard work. I do want to say to our audience that your books have changed my life, and everyone should pick up a book by Gil Troy, whether it's Moynihan's Moment, one that today is still so incredibly relevant, or The Zionist Ideas, which every person should have sitting on their coffee table for their young people, for their children to pick up and just read a little bit of these excerpts from these brilliant Zionists throughout history. So I want to thank you so much. Thank you for all the work that you've done with Stand With Us. And we just hope that the relationship will continue and grow stronger. So thank you so much, Gil. It was a pleasure.
Well, thank you. It's an honor to be part of the Stand With Us family.